Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to the weekend. It is a Saturday out here, September 14th, 2024, about 10:34 a.m. here, California time. Latest activity here on the earthquake 3D globe shows a 2.7. That earthquake there in Texas follows a larger event there just a short time ago with a 4.1 earthquake there in western Texas. We'll get to that here in just a minute. First, want to cover space weather activity, where we see we just saw a X flare, fairly large X flare, coming off of that massive sunspot region here that I said to keep an eye on. Been saying that here for the past couple days, and it's sure enough is throwing off some awesome X flares. Let's go ahead and get some details on that. Actually, I want to show you guys a video here real quick. We'll set this back just a short amount of time, and keep an eye on this area right there. Boom, that was short. Right, it just happened, but it is a beautiful feature out there from that sunspot, and a massive X flare. We'll have to keep an eye on the Space Weather Prediction Center, because it possibly could have shot off a CME as well. It would be somewhat geo-effective in that position, but we'll continue to watch that area for some further X flares. I'm not for sure why the forecast here shows minimal amounts in terms of the flaring potential. It should be way up in the about 25% here. Just looking at the complexity of 3825 down here. Beta gamma delta structure, those sunspots right there can produce some massive flares, just like what we've seen here a short time ago in X 4.5. If we look on the solar flare chart here, double check, make sure the bells are off. They are. Peak up here, X 4.51. One of the more stronger flares we've seen here recently, after a couple weeks, I would say, of quietness. But that one's offline, it looks like. Maybe Kevin's getting working on this site a little bit. Either way, keep an eye on the sunspot 3825 there. That's a sunspot that has produced multiple CME explosions here while it was on the far side of the sun. And now that it's Earth-facing side, we're still seeing those large explosions. Now, whether or not it produced a CME or not, we'll keep an eye on that here over the next couple nights. All right, earthquake activity, ramping up out here in the oil fields. Goodness, 4.1 earthquake coming in just within the last 40 minutes or so outside of Pecos, Texas, out there in the desert near the Delaware Mountains. Now, this area of Texas is littered with a whole bunch of fracking pads and oil pumping operations out here. You can zoom in on any map here and see all these little holding tanks, and wastewater ponds are out here as well. That's going to be these areas right here. That's water or pond or wastewater injection wells out here as well. But this earthquake swarm is occurring just due south of a solar farm. These are from what I've been told here, a massive solar farm, and that earthquake activity occurring just south here of it. I don't see any specific, what's this down here? This is some type of pond, but it doesn't really look like a, one of those wastewater ponds. It may just be some type of agricultural pond out there. But yeah, interesting earthquake activity out here today. 4.1 earthquake. 5 miles below the surface, and a swarm of other earthquake activity here following that 4.1 out in western Texas. And again, this whole area, if you zoom in on any region here, all these little checkered boxes and ponds out here, those are not swimming pools, for the hard-working folks there in the oil fields. Those are wastewater disposal ponds. I don't think you'd want to go swimming in those. And fracking pads out here as well. There's just thousands of them, thousands upon thousands. And Texas area has been somewhat minor in terms of earthquake activity here recently. Today's events, including the last 30 days, coming up on 512 earthquakes just in this area of Texas alone. But if you back out here, you can watch a trail of activity through these oil fields stretching up northward. Now, I don't know if maybe some of these oil fields that are getting hit are older, and eventually they are being affected by the plate tectonic stress that's out here underneath the North, or within the North American plate. But they follow a trend here, it seems like, from about western Texas through the Permian Basin upwards towards Oklahoma, and more recently some activity down here across these oil fields of south of San Antonio. If you look down here across satellite view, all these little checkered boxes out there, hundreds of them. You can't even walk 5 feet without running into the next one out here. That's how littered and cluttered it is. So earthquake activity has been on the rampant rise ever since the oil boom out here, and that will continue. That's a promise. And some of these earthquakes can get in the 5 range, mid to upper 5 range. So we'll continue to watch that, as it looks like things are under stress out here across the North American plate. So let's go check out California here, see what we got. Lighten up slightly across the creeping segment of the San Andreas Fault. Been watching this here recently. Of course, with all the elevated activity here across Southern California recently, it's good to watch any areas out here across the plate boundary, right? Due to the incredible strain and earthquake activity we've seen out here recently. No big earthquakes, but the increase in the various areas, excuse me, of swarming 4s and some 5 earthquakes out here. Magnitude 5 here around Bakersfield a few weeks back has been on the uptick for sure out here. But it's been limited, it seems like, right about the locked area here where the bend is, right around this big bend area near Frazier Park area, southward along the plate boundary, but west here. And that's got a lot of folks concerned that maybe the San Andreas Fault is about ready to pop. Definitely got to keep an eye on that. Today, though, we're seeing a little bit of migration of the pattern of earthquake activity up along the creeping segment of the San Andreas Fault. This area has been really awfully quiet, and normally that's got some type of earthquake activity on here on any given day. But 2 earthquakes, it looks like, coming in the last hour, 2.2 and a 2.1. Actually, a couple different earthquakes here, and a little sequence of swarming within this area. Again, right around the creeping section up towards the Santa Cruz Mountains area. Not really so much up there, but it seems like today it's mainly on the creeping segment of the San Andreas Fault. There's the Parkfield section. This area is definitely overdue. Well, maybe not overdue, but primed for a 6-pointer. It's about every 22 years that a 6-pointer strikes along the Parkfield segment of the San Andreas Fault, and the last one was back in 2004, which puts that at 20 years, and it's give or take 22 years. Sometimes it could be a little bit more, sometimes it could be a little bit less. So this area, somewhat ripe here for a 6-pointer, the Parkfield segment, but of course down here, the big one. Talking about upper 7s, lower 8s in the terms of the magnitude potential out here across the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault. That area, southern segment down here across Salton Sea northward a little bit, hasn't seen any major rupture in over 300 years. So there's a lot of strain out here against the California area right now with all these recent upticks. Goodness. So specifically down here across Southern California, Malibu area, this is a region that's seen that 4.7 here a couple days back. Majority of these earthquakes here from yesterday. A couple earthquakes this morning so far, 1.4 and a 1.3. Handful of smaller quakes out here as well. This earthquake 2.3 out in the Santa Barbara area, Santa Barbara Island area, it looks like. It's near the Santa Cruz Basin here, this earthquake right here. That's an interesting earthquake, though. It's back off of the Malibu Fault, a little bit further off into the Pacific. The pattern here has been, if I could draw some arrows, roughly aiming right at this area here. Pretty much draw a circle here across Southern California. And not to mention the elevated activity up here across the Garlock Fault shear zone. This mountain range here plays a big part in producing and building up strain in producing the likelihood of some big earthquake activity, along with the interaction of the San Andreas Fault there. One earthquake in the Ridgecrest area, 0.5. Handful of smaller quakes there in the area of just outside of Bakersfield where that 5-pointer struck a few weeks back. Majority of these from yesterday. So earthquake activity in general here across Southern California, extreme Southern California, has been on the light side today. But as I've stated here, it comes in waves and little patterns out here. Even though it might be somewhat quiet right now, it could kick up out of the blue. Last night we seen a little bit of elevated activity there when I was doing the update. So we'll continue to watch this area of Southern California. The strain up here across the creeping segment tells me that there's still an area of focus that we need to keep an eye on out here across Southern California. Further up north here, there's that movement from yesterday. Well, it looks like they had another 1.3 as well, but we got a 3.4 in there in the Calaveras fault zone from yesterday, with a handful of smaller quakes as well following that event. Bay Area specifically, though, here around the San Andreas Fault, northern segment, pretty quiet. Not a whole lot going on there right now, but again, it's good to be on guard. One earthquake out in the Fallon Station, a 1.5. That was at 9:59, so that's past here. Little earthquake on the Parkfield section right there. That's going to be, which earthquake is that? It's going to be a more recent one, 2.1 at 10:36 on that seismograph station. That matches up right there, 17:36 UTC time. So that's a 2.1. I'm glad that station's working pretty good. I still have to add on the Bakersfield station. I forgot about that last night. I was pretty tired. But yeah, overall, seismic activity somewhat light south, more active north here along this segment of the San Andreas Fault, the creeping segment. But just stay on guard today, folks. Still a lot of activity that's been happening out here across Southern California recently. Extreme Northern California, these three earthquakes here from yesterday. I don't think we got anything new today. Yeah, all of these earthquakes here from yesterday. Pacific Northwest, fairly quiet. Yellowstone National Park, nothing really showing up here. A little 0.5. Let's just double check that and see what we have. Not a whole lot of earthquake activity, that is. Looks like maybe one or two here on the Maple Creek seismograph station there. Very small, spiky earthquakes, but this right here, that's got to be picking up the 4.1 there in Texas recently. But these thicker blue lines, they look like they're weather related. So let me double check that. I just want to make sure. I always like to point out what's going on up here on the seismograph stations in terms of readings. And today it's quite windy up there across the area of Yellowstone National Park. Got some, I'm sure, got some higher wind gusts than that across some of these peaks out here. Let's see what we got for the weather radar here real quick. Hello? Nothing really. So that looks like there's some wind being picked up out here across various stations within the last hour. But earthquake activity, quiet there, folks, across Yellowstone. There's not a whole lot going on there for now. Nevada here looks a little bit more active today. A couple smaller quakes here outside of Las Vegas. That's an overall pattern that I've been watching as well, coinciding and subsequently at the same time here as the activity in Southern California. It's pretty much, if you look at the last 30 days here, you can see a lot of earthquake activity, right? There's a lot of earthquake activity on the map. Nevada's seen a lot more earthquakes here across the western edge here than we've seen in quite some time, with various swarms from Las Vegas northwestward towards Walker Lake. Very interesting activity. Then it stretches out here across the Tehachapi Mountains, and then southward, where we've seen a lot of elevated activity at various fault systems as well. Look how many earthquakes have struck out here. Just in this area alone, 30 days of all magnitudes, 1,919. And that's a lot of earthquake activity. Now, if you count just the 2.5 and above, 58. 58 earthquakes of various magnitudes. The largest going to be a 4.7 that we seen a couple days ago. That's in the last 30 days. But if we include the last 2 months there, we had that 5-pointer in 5.2 in Bakersfield, and various other 3s. And I think we've seen a couple other 4s out here as well. And it's really been the last 2 months that we've watched things come with an uptick out here across Southern California as far as this there's elevated activity. Whether it's leading to something major or not, that will remain to be seen. One little earthquake there outside, within the New Madrid seismic zone. That's a 1.7 earthquake. Outside of here, let's see what else we got here for the rest of the country, or rest of the world, excuse me. Pretty active over here across the western Pacific yesterday. Goodness, we had a lot of earthquake activity. So far today, looks like maybe one newer earthquake here, 5.3 near the Mariana Islands region, right here, just outside of Guam. Aside from that, all of this widespread earthquake activity here is from yesterday, but that was quite fascinating to watch. It just really kick up all over the place here. But nothing major stirring up out here. New Zealand's been kind of stacking up a bunch of 3s down here, trying to work its way across the plate boundary here across South Island with the recent 3.2. So obviously this is an area to watch. We really haven't seen anything major as far as adjustment goes across the New Zealand area. So it's always a little bit of concerning when we don't have any major adjustment down there. I mean, obviously, it's there. There's quite a few strained areas across New Zealand that are well overdue for some earthquake activity. The Atlantic Ocean, pretty quiet. Mediterranean area, as you can see, a couple smaller 2s out there today. So, bigger focus, I guess, right now is on the North American plate. That includes California. Got these inland earthquakes, the oil fields getting hit with the pressure that's being applied out here on the North American plate. Movement up into Alaska area is fairly new as well. See what we got here across this area. Latest earthquake of 4.3 here along the Aleutian Trench, pretty shallow. 3.9 earlier, 23 miles deep into the subduction zone. And just a short time later, we've seen that adjustment upstream here with a 4.3, much shallower at the surface levels. That's a major subduction zone area. And very capable, as we know, of producing some big-time quakes, 9s, and many other size earthquakes out there. All right, let's see here. Real quick glance at the space weather activity once again. Looking at this chart here, it's hard to say if it produced a CME or not. Either way, that's a fairly strong flare, and 4.5. That would make it the the 5th. It would tie for this one as the 5th strongest flare this solar cycle. This previous one here was back in May of this year, May 6th. X4.5 from 3663, but now we're at an X4.5 from our newer sunspot. Either way, that's a fairly massive flare, but they can get much larger, and they can get much larger than an 8.7, X8.7. They can get way up there, and we're still not even at our maximum yet in terms of the solar cycle 25 peak area. We still got just under a year before the maximum occurs, and that's expected in the June time period of next year, when solar cycle 25 is expected to peak out, and then eventually it'll slow down towards solar minimum, but we'll still have like another year or two following maximum peak next year of watching these solar flares. So we're amping up, obviously. And looking at this sunspot area, it almost looks like it wants to produce another X flare. It's still flaring like that match that just won't go out. Or those birthday candles that you blow on, right? And you try and blow them out, and they keep sparking back up. Kind of reminds me of that. Either way, this looks like it wants to produce another flare. So we'll keep an eye on that. It is off towards the southeastern limb, and it's very iffy to say if we'll see anything Earth-directed if it were to produce a CME. It would have to be a little bit more, into position here, but it'll be working its way here over the next couple days. And again, this area is a sunspot region that's been throwing off massive CMEs on the far side of the sun back about a week or so ago. We've seen multiple explosions from this sunspot, so it could get interesting here as we head into early next week once it's into a little bit more Earth-directed view. As far as any major severe weather goes here today, got marginal risk for some severe weather in South Dakota, North Dakota area, mainly due to, it looks like a little bit of wind and some hail threats. Nothing big, though. No tornado threat, at least less than 2%. All right, folks, have yourself a good day. I am going to maybe catch up on some schoolwork here while it's a weekend. Always like to be prepared here. Let me add the Bakersfield station on here while I'm thinking about it. That's going to be right about, let's see here, where are we? Cal State Bakersfield, which is right there. There we go. Hopefully I got it. There it is. Looks like a little bit of earthquake activity on it as well right here. Don't need that many up there. But for now, we'll continue to keep an eye on things here across the West Coast. Hope everyone enjoys their Saturday. And we'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later on. Unless something major happens. Definitely will jump back in here for an update on that. Take care, folks. Stay safe.